your end? Oh no. It's a smooth and slick start to our 100th Reading Online Sports Economics.
Completely frozen.
Completely frozen. Benedict, am I moving for you or am I frozen for you as well?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. I think the problem is not at Reading.
But all right, am I moving? Can you see me move?
I can see you move.
Okay, fine. There you go. That's what I wanted to know.
I saw you move, so
okay,
sure it'll be fine.
Everything's okay. Welcome everyone to our 100th Reading Online Sport Economics Seminar. I'm not going to dwell too long on the fact we've brought up our century, but it has been a pleasure over the last 2.5 almost years doing these events throughout the heights of the depths of the pandemic to times as we are now, where we're pretending it doesn't exist anymore and carrying on whilst cases are still raging all around. But it's always been an excuse to listen to top research on a Friday afternoon for me, a Friday late evening for people in Australia, as Hannah is our speaker today, and early in the morning if you're over in North America. We met for a conference earlier in the week here in Reading, which is why we've got guests still here in Reading, which is fantastic, Kai and Benedict. That was the Math Sport International Conference that we had earlier in the week. It was great to see people in person, and if you are able to and you are thinking about conferences you want to attend in person later in the year, I'm going to flag up what we're planning for December the 13th and 14th here in Reading, our second Reading Football Economics Workshop. Some of you came to the first, which was just prior to the pandemic, back in 2019 September. And we plan our second Reading Football Economics Workshop. If you're wondering why the 13th, 14th December, those are the dates of the 2 World Cup semi-finals in Qatar. We're not going to be in Qatar, I'm afraid, unless someone very generous comes along and steps in and offers for us to be there and give us tickets for the events. We'll be in Reading, but we will obviously watch those events. There is a page here which I'll put in the chat. And there is a form where you can submit an abstract for that conference if you want to. So December the 13th, 14th, here in Reading, if you want an in-person conference to join us for that. But for now, we carry on meeting online. We carry on listening to the top research from all around the world each Friday. And we've got Hannah Altman joining us at 11:30 p.m. In Australia from the Queensland University of Technology, who's going to be presenting the market for lemons in the health and fitness industry. Hannah, please do take away your talk.
Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So apologies ahead of time if the internet decides to cut out. Hopefully it works. So my name is Hannah, and I'm in the last 8 months of my PhD at Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia, with Ben O'Toole as my supervisor and Brad Humphreys from West Virginia as my external. So today I'm going to be taking you through a paper which is based on the research that I did for my master's thesis. So it's on the market for lemons in the health and fitness industry, using the example of New Zealand Aotearoa. So a bit of an introduction. A key point of this research is to help explain why injury rates amongst gym users have grown much more rapidly than the growth in gym users. This is exemplified in the study by the fitness industry in New Zealand, particularly. We identify asymmetric and costly information, moral hazard, and suboptimal decision-making environments as being the heart of the problem. So this is just a graph showing how much demand for gyms has increased in New Zealand. So you can see a huge increase in demand for people joining 24-hour gyms, online fitness classes, personal training. So this was prior to the pandemic, this graph. So this has actually increased even more. We've seen in more research we've done since pandemic, people gaining weight during lockdown, just wanting to attempt to get fitter by consuming a gym membership, not always using it though. So the issue that we've come across is gym-related injury claims in New Zealand, and claims in New Zealand government-funded no-fault insurance schemes, the ACC, rose from around 17,500 in 2011 to almost 53,000 in 2017, which is quite substantial. So the reason why ACC is really interesting and an interesting measure to use is ACC is very unique. It's a no-fault insurance system, which is very unique to New Zealand, to the extent that, unlike the US, you can't sue somebody for hurting you or injuring you. So if you go see an exercise professional who doesn't really know what they're doing, and they get you to do something that's really catchy, because what we can see now with the fitness industry growing, it's very much dependent on social media for advertising. So trainers are very much dependent on that shock impact. So getting people to do stuff that's really high risk of injury. So if you get somebody to do something to get attention and it just doesn't end well, so let's say somebody breaks their hip, which has around a 50% chance of actually mortality within 5 years, which is particularly due to demographic that usually breaks their hip, being over 80 from a fall. But there really are no consequences in New Zealand. In the States, you could be sued for $10 million, where in New Zealand, all you do is you go to the physio, you say, I fell while training with Michael standing on one foot on a Swiss ball, and the government will pay. Whereas in the States, you'll be sued. So that's where ACC really increases that risk of moral hazard and can be really dangerous. Whilst the number of gym users has risen over the time, the rate of injuries rose at a much faster pace than the increase in gym users, according to the NZ Exercise Association, who own and operate Reps. Reps is the gold standard in New Zealand for gym quality branding. So Reps is really supposed to be the signal to consumers that this trainer or this gym is quality. The system was developed for and is owned by the industry body representing gym owners and organizations within the health and fitness industry in New Zealand. Both ACC and the Exercise Association are really surprised as to how to account for the relative increase in the injury rate. So one thing that we did find is one reason for this massive increase, particularly in New Zealand, which is higher than the global norm, even though it is quite high everywhere else, which has the lack of regulation, is ACC and realistically moral hazard. There's no ownership for consequences of actions. So our research question was, might there be an issue with the quality of exercise professionals in New Zealand? So when we say exercise professionals, we mean personal trainers, exercise scientists, exercise physiologists, physiotherapists. Is the quality of labor supply in the health and fitness industry in New Zealand falling when years of education is used as a proxy for quality? Is the registered exercise professionals brand a positive or negative signal of quality using years of education as a proxy for quality? So just to reemphasize that, what we're trying to see is Reps, the golden standard for quality, what consumers are told to use as a signal for quality. When you use years of education as a proxy for knowledge and quality of professionals, is it actually a negative signal? That's what we're trying to find out. There are no minimum skill requirements needed to work within the New Zealand health and fitness industry. The rapid growth has given rise, and there has been an increased demand for labor in the industry, but many industry insiders want to keep out completely unqualified. So just a little note, internationally, so American College of Sports Medicine has also mentioned their concern. This goes internationally in Australia, in the US, in Canada, in European countries, there is a lack of regulation. So a lot of unqualified people working and practicing in the industry, a lot of fake qualifications coming across by people who have no education, developing 1 week qualifications that people are gaining, paying thousands of dollars for, thinking that they're good qualifications, like advertising themselves as a rehab specialist based on a 1-day course, which is really, really scary, where there are other countries like South Korea and Chile where you actually have to have a bachelor's degree minimum to practice, a minimum of 3 years education level. And they actually do have lower injury rates in those markets. So to meet the demand, more and more qualification providers have entered the market and made available a wide variety of skill training courses, including online courses, which can be completed quickly in as little as a few hours or days. The REPS branding system was developed to address the Wild West image of the industry that you really are starting to see, and the perceived disparity in the quality of practitioners within the sector by offering gyms and practitioners an industry-wide seal of approval by validating their qualifications. REPS, therefore, was developed as a way of signaling quality within a sector that has no marker or benchmark for what quality is, really creating the potential for a market for lemons, just like Aotearoa's market for lemons with used cars. But we argue that given the present landscape within the industry, REPS, as it is presently structured, poor regulation, and the ACC system together allow for false signals to be sent to consumers, given the existence of asymmetric information. This allows for relatively poor qualified individuals to practice well beyond their scope of qualification, which has resulted in greater numbers of injuries. So just to give a little bit of perspective of this, you would have to be an exercise physiologist or a rehab specialist, you have to study for around 4 years. That's the base internationally to get a Bachelor of Exercise Physiology, and then you're a rehab specialist. But you can now do a 1-week course to become a personal trainer and a 6-hour top-up to be a rehab specialist and register with REPS as a rehab specialist against the rehab specialist who has a bachelor's degree. But how do consumers know the difference between rehab specialist A and rehab specialist B when they're both REPS qualified? So it sets a very dangerous predicament. Given the above, trainers and potential trainers receive no marginal benefit from the consumption of additional education except the personal utility gained from knowledge. So I guess as academics, we all understand that gain utility from knowledge, but a lot of people just want to earn money. They don't care. So have the conditions led to less consumption of quality education in New Zealand's industry, which in turn produces a situation wherein less qualified trainers have chased out more qualified trainers, creating a market of lemons, excess with lower quality practitioners dominating the industry. We also want to note, is REPS, as it is presently structured, acting as a positive or negative signal of quality using years of education as proxy for quality, given the fact that trainers with radically different levels of qualification are all able to register within REPS and receive identical signals, acceptable quality to consumers? Is REPS actually acting as a positive signal? That's what we want to know. Given the lack of regulation within the present industry structure and the availability of universal no-fault accident insurance in New Zealand, there's no real need to even be registered with REPS to practice. It doesn't give you insurance, so you don't need to be registered. So why are people doing it? Given that there are no benefits to registering, this leads us to the hypothesis that high-quality trainers, i.e. trainers with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or PhD, will tend not to register, and that there will with no significant relationship between REPS registration and the qualification of trainers. So the methodological and analytical approach used in the study, we used human capital theory intersecting with the institutional economics, in that we examine how institutions such as REPS distort the incentives to generate appropriate levels of quality trainers given the demand for health and fitness services. We examined the impact of asymmetric information and decision-making following the Market for Lemons paper by George Akerlof. We also tied this to signaling theory, George Akerlof and Michael Spence, and status-defining behavior in a world of asymmetric information. We also explored doing the best you can given one's knowledge base and information following on Herber Simon, and how this can translate into the use of fast and frugal heuristics as developed by Gerke Grinzer. Finally, we discussed the role all institutions play in affecting decision-making as per Douglas North's approach. So my data set is 100% original data and was scraped twice over during my master's candidature between 2018 and 2020. So it was scraped before the pandemic. It finished just before the pandemic hit. We have data on 500 exercise professionals, none of which are from city fitness clubs, because they do not release information on their practitioners' qualifications. This we believe is because City Fitness, to work for them, you need to do their 5-day personal trainer course. So they don't care if you have a master's degree, you need to do their course. And their life of an exercise professional is actually stated to be 3 weeks. So we don't have access to the data as they hide it. We can assume the sample represents half the New Zealand industry. We have data from 6 major cities and towns in New Zealand. The data was collected from gyms, websites, cross-checked online with the reps directory, and cross-checked with LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook profiles. So I collected all this data over those times. So pretty much we went on the gym's websites. We then checked to see whether or not the qualifications that the websites had were actually true, i.e. were the trainers telling the truth. We checked graduation forms on university websites. We cross-checked all qualifications. We checked to see if LinkedIn profiles matched up, Instagram profiles matched up, and Facebook profiles matched up. We then checked if the trainers are reps registered or if they have ever been using the online reps database. So we checked pretty much, are they currently registered or have they been in the past? We also checked to see if if people have been dropping off with registration over time. In order to sort this data and maximize the removal of noise from the decision-making environment, we developed an original ranking system. So pretty much what we just said is 0. Ranking means you have no qualifications at all, meaning you just like fitness and you decided to be an exercise professional because it looks like fun. Or maybe you lost 2 pounds because you didn't eat for 2 days and now you're a weight loss guru. So you'd be ranked to 0. Number 1 is a certificate of 1 to 3. Meaning you did a course that could have taken you between 6 hours to 24 hours to complete. Ranking 2 is a certificate of 4 to 6, so that could have taken you anywhere between 2 to 4 months to complete. Number 3 is a diploma level, which is 6 months to a year, and level 4 is a bachelor's degree, which is a 3-year qualification. And level 5 is a postgraduate qualification, which is a master's degree to a PhD. So as most of us would know, that could take anywhere from 5 years to, God knows, 10, 12 years to complete. So highly qualified professionals. So as we know, the cost of human capital is quite expensive. So in New Zealand, we can see just how long it takes to obtain certain qualifications and where they're done. So yeah, just as we've already discussed. So some key findings: the absolute number of well-qualified trainers has fallen in spite of the number of trainers who are practicing, more than double from 2012 to 2017. So we assume this is because bachelor's degree, you're not practicing. So you're going to graduate after 4 years and 3 to 4 years, and you have no industry experience. And you're going up in the market against somebody who's also a rehab specialist, who has 4 years industry experience. So if you're a consumer and you see person A and person B, and one person has 4 years experience and one person is fresh out of qualification, you're going to hire the person with 4 years experience most likely. So actually, there's a disincentive to gain the human capital given how the market's structured. So higher level of education, the less likely practitioner is to be reps registered, because why are you going to pay money for the signal when you could just advertise and sell your qualifications? And then really push that. When reps doesn't have a master's degree level or anything, they just have reps signal it. It's the same no matter what your level of qualifications are. So we can just see here, the qualification for all trainers and reps is 0.05, which is very, very low. The qualification for level 4 to 5 trainers, so degree qualified trainers, is actually negative. So it's a negative 0.09. So there's negative correlation between being a qualified quality trainer and being registered. Now, gyms can also register as reps registered. So you need to have a certain level of practitioners who are registered with reps who work at the establishment. We can actually see there's a negative 18% correlation between high levels of human capital and being a reps registered facility, which is quite concerning, to be perfectly frank. So here we're going to see are some more key findings. So we can just see that level 5s are less likely to be registered with reps, etc. So it's not what we would expect to see from a quality signal to consumers. And this graph just highlights that as well, as you can see from the charts. And then we have another one just highlighting what I've just explained. So to summarize what the previous graph said, reps is actually acting as a negative sign of quality for gyms. Negative sign of quality for top tier qualified trainers. So insignificant low correlation of quality for trainers of all qualifications. But for top tier trainers, we can see it's a negative sign quality, which is not, if you were to interview most people in New Zealand, is not what people would expect to see from the quality signal. The publicly available data do not support the hypothesis that reps registration is positively and strongly correlated to quality gym and exercise professionals or trainers in New Zealand, as measured by the objective qualifications of exercise professionals. Indeed, the data overwhelmingly are in support of rejecting the core hypothesis of such a positive and strong analytical substantive relationship. This finding suggests that reps registration is not fit for purpose. A strong signal is needed to identify quality gyms and exercise professionals in New Zealand. Reps registration is therefore not an optimal, fast, and frugal heuristic, which customers can use to choose gyms and exercise professionals for their level of measured quality. If they choose to use reps, and this would appear to be a rational choice given the information that they have at hand, they would most likely end up making a suboptimal choice, choices that do not match their stated preferences. Given that the rep signal is not an optimal measure of quality, but actually far from it, this will affect the demand for exercise professionals at different levels of qualifications. This is especially the case when the rep signal, as it currently is constituted, can be expected to be a disincentive for fitness-related exercise professionals related human capital formation at higher graduation of qualifications. Hence, one would expect that rep signaling device, since it acts as a fast and frugal heuristic, will impact the supply side of the exercise professional labor market, as we've actually seen in New Zealand, and we're seeing even more, particularly post-COVID, where a lot of people were doing. We discovered this with data collection for my PhD, where a lot of people got bored during lockdown, particularly in Australia when they were working, and they did online courses, and then they went into market. So you can actually see a huge decrease in the quality of labor supply internationally, given how the market is structured. So the implications on public health in New Zealand, or the implications of public health in any area, anywhere in the world that doesn't have any set regulation, when signals are suboptimal, but even more so if they are misleading and lead to poor suboptimal choices. This can have negative health consequences when these choices relate to the health of the affected customers. Exercise prescription is actually very, very dangerous. It's a job that a lot of people, particularly older populations, don't correlate to any level of intellect, which is something we're looking at in my PhD through surveys. So when people make choices on who they're going to hire and they don't think there's a skill set and they hurt themselves, they don't think, oh, I hurt myself because the person I'm working with isn't qualified. They think, oh, I hurt myself because I'm not competent enough to do exercise, or because I should just stay away from fitness because I have 2 left feet. This means people will therefore take away a lifelong dislike for exercise and movement, therefore putting them at a higher risk of adverse health effects like diabetes, etc. Therefore, putting more and more strain on the public health system when the health system has to kick in and pay for or medication and treatment for adverse health outcomes. Along with this, the health system has to, particularly in New Zealand with ACC, has to pay for the rehab, the physiotherapists, the MRIs, and all the treatment implications that come with these injuries. So it has huge effects on long-term health of the country, and particularly when people avoid exercise. The fitness industry is one where poor choices in terms of gym or exercise professionals can result in suboptimal health consequences, as I just described. So, a consumer's choice can result in fitness outcomes being less than they would otherwise be had informed environments allowed for informed choices. So, this elaborated consumers had better information, they would be less likely to go with those professionals and be injured, and they might actually have a better taste in their mouth of what fitness outcomes are. Also, suboptimal choices could result in an unavoidable injury. Both these outcomes could affect the well-being of consumers, their ability to work and work well, and even impact their overall quality of life and long-term life expectancy, as some injuries can come with risk of mortality. This can also increase the cost to the public sector, as I already discussed, when the sector covers the whole or part of the cost of injury or poor health resulting from suboptimal choices. So this is just a diagram, a production possibility frontier, where we can just see the optimum is health and fitness outcomes with quality information environment and no externalities. Then we have health outcomes, RE fitness with a suboptimal information environment and no externalities. Then we have the worst outcome, which would be health outcomes, RE fitness plus unnecessary injuries with the suboptimal information environment and no externalities. And I can come back to this at the end if anybody has any questions. So the fact that there is no substantive positive relationship between reps registration and exercise professional qualification suggests a disincentive for individuals to invest in the human capital required for the fitness industry to provide quality services to its consumers. We provide data on the availability of qualifications and their costs. It is quite cheap to earn a low-level qualifications, as anybody would expect, but it's also quite possible to attain reps registration even with the lowest level and an inexpensive qualification. You just pay more for reps the less qualified you are. So this strongly suggests a disincentive to invest in further human capital formation. Moreover, in this scenario, there is no clear incentive for gyms to hire the most qualified exercise professionals unless they are absolutely required to for certain tasks. Why would you pay somebody more money. So let's say somebody with a master's degree, why would you pay them $70 an hour when you could pay somebody the living minimum wage in New Zealand? I think that's $19. So it creates a very bad incentive for big companies. The human capital implication of our empirical findings are discussed in another paper I did as part of my master's. So the research agenda of this work is to explain the conditions under which there is an expected decrease in quality of trainers' labor supply. To also explain the conditions under which the consumer of gyms and related trainer services face increased health risk, and explain how the institutional environment, certification, recognition, and insurance structure can generate negative health outcomes. The policy implication goals is to advise governments on the risk to consumers with the present system. Governments can increase regulation and affect a minimum standard of qualifications to practice, as we can see in Chile and South Korea and Brazil, which you also do have lower injury rates. Charge insurance rates for practitioners that reflect their risk profiles given their scope of practice. So that is something we do see in some countries, like US is doing a very good job with that. It's done very poorly in Australia. So Australia, you actually pay more money for insurance the more qualified you are, because technically you're working with riskier population. So if you're an exercise physiologist, you're paying around $2,000 a year insurance, or if you're a rehab specializing trainer, you're paying $300 for insurance. So there's a huge disincentive in Australia to have a high level of human capital. Not only are you studying for all these years, paying tuition fees and giving up your time, you're also paying more insurance throughout your career. But in New Zealand, you don't even need insurance. And if you have insurance, but many people in New Zealand say having insurance is just stupid, because what's the benefit? So there's no incentive. So that's something the governments really could do to minimize risk. Offer clear scope of practice tied to education levels. Make practitioners responsible for their actions. So if they injure somebody, they should be sued. So some related research that we're currently doing is consumers are not stupid, so why do they appear to be fooled? Are consumers looking for something more than just a trainer? So that's something we're looking at in my PhD right now. Are people actually hiring trainers based on their appearance? Are they gaining some sort of benefit from being around somebody who's really attractive, or maybe they're even gaining something from being around somebody who's not attractive because it makes them feel good about themselves. So is there another relationship that consumers are after that goes beyond qualification? Does the attractiveness of the trainer increase the probability that they can get away with being low quality? So that's something we've called in my master's thesis actually the Tinder effect. So pretty much people are hiring often using social media, so Instagram and Facebook, based on images. So people are not looking at qualifications, they're just swiping through photos. So swiping right until they find a photo they like and clicking on the photo they like, not based on the substance, but based on almost like Tinder, based on attraction. The consequences for ACC. We're also looking at nudging or regulatory change to ensure quality of practitioners. So let's say teachers or doctors or most professionals, maybe a teacher who's more attractive, or a lecturer who's more attractive, or a doctor who's more attractive might get, let's say the teacher might get better teaching evaluations, or a doctor might get more patients. That's quite different, because to be a doctor, you have to have a baseline level of qualification. So maybe being attractive might signal you're more particular or you're more careful. But as long as everybody has the same level of qualification, it doesn't really make a difference to the industry. People are choosing based on beauty, etc. It's really a risk factor and a danger in the fitness industry, because there's no minimum standard. And we are seeing in some of the data we found from my PhD that there is really a trade-off between beauty or attractiveness and sexuality and the quality of trainers. So lower quality trainers in terms of education are more sexualized, and that's what's really dangerous. So looking at the international industry for best practice decision-making environments, so looking at what countries in Chile and Korea are doing. So that's my talk. So nice and short, around 40 minutes. So yeah, any questions I'm happy to take, and thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much, Hannah. So we've got plenty of time for questions and comments. If anyone wants to raise their hand and ask questions. I think a question I might ask in the silence is a rather simple question, I guess, which is, why hasn't the government done anything about this before now? I mean, I don't wish to say that what you're presenting is obvious, but you've made clear a really clear problem, which needs something to be done about it. So, is there some reason why the government hasn't done something about it? Does it gain from the status quo?
It is very obvious. I agree with that. It's extraordinarily obvious. That's why I was surprised there was no literature on it. And it's something that a lot of American College of Sports Medicine in the States, which is the biggest fitness body, is screaming at the top of their lungs that government needs to do something about it. From what we found, because we looked more into it in my PhD research, what we really found is that a lot of people just don't really associate exercise and fitness with any level of intellect at all. They just figure there's no science or sports or skill that goes into sports performance or into exercise. So it's not really an industry that needs regulation. They're not really associating life-threatening injuries with gyms, when there actually are a lot of deaths in gyms from just blatant stupidity, or, for lack of better words, bro science. So yeah, I have no idea why the governments haven't acted on it, because it is common sense. Free market.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I always think football's my go-to sport for everything, and it is actually relatively late in the day that coaches are expected to have FA qualifications or UEFA qualifications. I guess maybe that's a similar parallel, obviously perhaps without the same level of necessary danger for people, but certainly when you have football coaches coaching young kids, there's potential for harm there, not just physically but also in terms of safeguarding type issues as well.
Definitely. And we did look at some data, not on this project, but on another project, on performance and qualifications of practitioners. And we can see that sports teams, so there was some examples in New Zealand with football, where the teams that had certificate level trainers had really high injury rates and very sporadic performance. So you'd have star players getting injured before a game and not being able to play. So there actually was a correlation between what goes into the sports performance, which we often overlook. We often don't look at how that player is able to kick or run. So the level of quality of those practitioners and the performance of the team. So lower level qualifications, lower performance of the team.
Okay, more questions and comments from anyone in the audience? Perhaps for those here in Western Europe, we're perhaps all just sweltering in the heat and unable to think of questions in response. In which case, thank you very much, Hannah. A really interesting presentation, interesting research looking at
No problem. Thank you for
what
having
is
me.
a significant problem. Thank you for staying up as late as you have done to present. Very admirable at the start of your weekend. So I do wish you a fantastic rest of your weekend. Now that your weekend is certainly already here. We will be back again next week when we have Benedikt Schmal from the Heinrich Heine University Düsseldorf presenting Rabbits Caught in the Headlights, Experts, Crowd Wisdom and Belief Updating. So wish you all a fantastic weekend and see you all next week.